It all began like any other primetime interview: bright lights, polished host, a calm opening segment. The set was pristine, the energy measured, and everything seemed set for a typical political Q&A. But then entered Karoline Leavitt, not just a rising conservative star, but a woman on a mission. And within seconds of sitting down, it became crystal clear that this wasn't going to be your average TV appearance. With the poise of a media veteran and the fire of someone who's fed up with the establishment, Karoline leaned forward and delivered her first verbal blow. "The American people are being lied to," she said, staring down the lens of the camera. "Not just misinformed, manipulated." You could practically feel the oxygen leave the room. The host blinked in stunned silence. The audience on set went still, and viewers watching at home, they sat up straighter. They turned the volume up. Something big was about to happen. Karoline wasn't waiting for a question. She came to confront, to challenge, and to expose. This wasn't an interview. It was a live ambush on mainstream media hypocrisy, and every second was dripping with intensity. She continued, her tone fierce but focused. "We're living in a time where media outlets, the so-called gatekeepers of truth, are choosing narrative over news. They're not reporting reality. They're manufacturing outrage, but only when it fits their agenda." She paused just long enough to let that sink in. The host shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The producers behind the glass? Probably scrambling? Then Karoline did what most guests are too careful, or too afraid, to do. She started dropping names. CNN, MSNBC, The View. They don't even pretend to be neutral anymore. Rachel Maddow spins stories like a fiction writer. Don Lemon spent years attacking conservatives, and only now do they admit he might have gone too far? Her voice sharpened. Where was the accountability when real scandals broke involving the left's darlings? Where was the wall-to-wall coverage then? Her words hit like lightning bolts. She wasn't throwing shade. She was throwing fire, and she wasn't just pointing fingers at journalists. She aimed higher, straight into Hollywood's protected circle of elites. "Why is it," she demanded, "that when celebrities like Jay-Z, Beyoncé, or even Oprah speak, they're treated like prophets? But when someone like me or any conservative speaks up, we're branded as dangerous?" She looked straight into the camera, her voice unwavering. "We are not the threat. The threat is a media machine that protects its own and vilifies anyone who dares to challenge it." By this point, the segment had completely derailed, at least from the host's perspective. But for millions of Americans watching, it had just become must-see TV. Karoline Leavitt wasn't playing by their rules. She was calling them out live and unfiltered. And just when viewers thought she might ease up, she leaned in harder. Diddy scandals? Silence? Hunter Biden's laptop? Laughed off? But if a conservative tweets the wrong opinion, suddenly it's breaking news for 72 hours. What made her monologue so explosive wasn't just the content, it was the calm, surgical precision with which she delivered it. She didn't shout. She didn't flail. She stated facts, backed them with examples, and exposed the hypocrisy so clearly it couldn't be ignored. Some in the media tried to brush it off as a rant, but it wasn't. It was a strategic, well-delivered blitz aimed directly at the heart of an industry that so often escapes scrutiny. As the host tried to steer the conversation back to safer territory, Karoline wasn't having it. She finished with one final blow, one that would ignite social media, light up group chats, and dominate political forums for days. "We don't need celebrities pretending to be moral authorities. We need journalists who tell the truth, not protect the powerful. The media needs to stop choosing sides and start choosing honesty. Until then, the American people will keep tuning out and speaking up." Mic dropped. The segment ended, but the firestorm was just beginning. Clips of Karoline's appearance went viral. Hashtags trended. Pundits scrambled to respond. Some praised her as a truth-teller. Others called her dangerous. But one thing was certain. Karoline Leavitt had shattered the script, and the media couldn't put it back together fast enough. Without skipping a beat, Karoline Leavitt turned up the heat. Fresh off her opening blast, she leaned into the camera, her tone measured but unmistakably intense. "Let's stop pretending the media is confused," she began. "They're not confused, they're complicit." And just like that, she went from calling out vague hypocrisy to naming names, live on air. "Why is it," she asked, voice rising just slightly for emphasis, "that CNN, MSNBC, and their so-called journalists ignore major scandals involving their favorite elites? But the moment a conservative sneezes out of line, it's breaking news?" Before the host could interrupt, Karoline fired the first shot. "Rachel Maddow, she's not a journalist, she's a script reader for the left. She didn't spend a single night breaking down the lawsuits and serious accusations against Diddy, but she'll spend weeks dissecting a Trump tweet from 2016. The studio air grew thicker with every word. Then came another name. Don Lemon spent years bashing conservatives on air. And only after countless incidents and sinking ratings do they quietly show him the door. He was never held accountable by his peers, because he was saying what they wanted to hear. Her tone was surgical. Not a chaotic rant, but a cutting, deliberate attack. She wasn't just venting, she was building a case, piece by piece, narrative by narrative. Karoline continued, "The pattern is clear. When someone like Kanye West says something controversial, the media explodes, and rightly so in some cases. But when Diddy faces multiple serious allegations involving abuse and trafficking, suddenly there's radio silence. Where's the outrage? Where's the 24-hour cycle? Where's the accountability?" The host attempted a soft deflection, mumbling something about journalistic standards. But Karoline was already steps ahead. "Oh, standards? Spare me," she snapped. "Where were those standards when NBC ran stories on anonymous sources about conservatives? Stories that fell apart within days. Where are those standards when The View spreads blatant misinformation and gets a free pass because it's just opinion?" She pointed out that the mainstream media isn't just inconsistent, it's coordinated. According to Karoline, it's not about mistakes or slants, it's about protection. Protection for celebrities, politicians, and power players who align with the narrative, and persecution for anyone who dares to challenge it. She then referenced specific moments. Diddy's case? Most outlets gave it a paragraph buried beneath pop culture fluff. Meanwhile, a conservative candidate makes a campaign ad the media doesn't like, and boom, full panel analysis on every network. Her comparison wasn't just rhetorical. She listed headlines, timestamps, and examples. Viewers at home didn't need to be convinced. They just needed the proof. And Karoline had it. Then came her thesis, the statement that would send a chill down the media's spine. "This isn't journalism, it's propaganda," she said. "And it's all wrapped up in credibility they no longer deserve." At that moment, Twitter erupted. Clips of the interview, raw, unfiltered, and fiery, began circulating faster than any talking head on cable could catch up. Hashtags like Nash Media Cover-Up and Mosh Leave It Unfiltered began trending. Conservative influencers praised her. Even some moderates admitted she had a point, but Karoline wasn't done. She pushed the discussion further. This system is designed to protect those at the top. If you're a liberal icon, a wealthy celebrity, or a Democrat donor, you can survive any scandal with barely a scratch. But if you wear a MAGA hat, hold a Bible, or question the mainstream narrative, you're canceled before dinner. With that, she slammed the double standard into plain view. The media's selective outrage wasn't an accident. It was a weapon, and Karoline Leavitt had just exposed it on national TV. The host tried again to redirect. "But surely you don't believe the media is intentionally hiding facts?" Karoline gave him a look, calm, confident, unblinking. "Oh, I don't believe it. I know it. And so do the American people. That's why your ratings are crashing and independent media is on the rise. People are waking up, and you're panicking. It was more than just a segment. It was a statement of rebellion, a challenge to a media industry that had grown too comfortable, too biased, and too insulated from the consequences of its own narrative control. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt wasn't afraid to speak the truth. And this time, she'd done it in front of millions. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt wasn't afraid to speak the truth. And this time, she'd done it in front of millions. Then, she turned up the heat. It's not just the media, it's the entire celebrity industrial complex, Karoline said. Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Oprah, they're all treated like royalty while conservatives are demonized for simply speaking truth. Her voice sharpened as she tore into the double standards. When rappers are praised for controversial lyrics but Christian athletes are problematic, Leavitt had one word: insanity. Twitter exploded as her words circulated, triggering fans, critics, and celebrities alike. But Karoline wasn't done. Leavitt didn't just rant, she brought receipts. She referenced the media's minimal coverage of serious lawsuits involving major figures like Diddy and even the Clintons. You don't have to agree with me, she said, but ask yourself why these stories vanish while one MAGA tweet becomes a 3-day scandal. She laid out timelines, screen grabs, and blatant disparities in reporting. It wasn't just opinion, it was a courtroom-style case against the gatekeepers of information. As the segment drew to a close, Karoline looked directly into the camera. We don't need more celebrities pretending to be moral guides, she stated. We need accountability, we need truth, and we need media that serves the people, not protects the elite. The host tried to pivot, but the damage was done. Social media erupted. Her monologue trended instantly. Whether you loved her or hated her, one thing was clear: Karoline Leavitt had just declared war on media hypocrisy, and she brought the receipts.